Hello, I wanted to review with you a little bit on economic and social policy since we weren't able to cover that topic in class. This is going to go pretty quick, but I do need you to understand some key vocabulary words. So I'm going to minimize myself down here a little bit. Boo, there I am. Hi, everybody. And I will post this PowerPoint, but go ahead and we're going to flip through it just a little bit here. Hold on. There I am. All right, so this is really two big key things. What do you do? What does the government do economically, and what do we do with social policy? So I want to go through a couple of the key things here. Everything is about the economy, or boils down to, if things are going good in the economy, usually congressmen and the presidential ratings are good, and the effect is the same. If the economy is bad, people tend to blame the president. They call this the nerve center in American politics, and three major goals are, here's what any candidate wants to do. They want to have high employment rates, so that's why they talk about unemployment quite a bit and how they measure presidents. They want low inflation, and they want economic growth. Two different types, and you'll probably take these classes in college where you can measure this. You can either take macroeconomics or microeconomics, and we're going to look at both of those, pretty much focusing mostly on macroeconomics, but when you get to college, those will probably be two choices that you can look at. Macroeconomics is everything that involves economic activity in a country. It's regulated by income that comes into the country and the outflow, or our expenditures. Two big things, and these are the two words that I want to make sure that you understand. There's fiscal policy and monetary policy that the president and Congress have to guide, fiscal and monetary. So I want to talk about fiscal policy first. Anytime you hear the word fiscal, that means our federal budget. So are we under budget? Do we have a balanced budget in the United States at the federal level? And right here, this would mean what is our spending and what money is coming in. So total revenue equals total spending. That would be a balanced budget. And you know, when revenue exceeds spending, which is what it's doing right now with our $17 trillion debt, revenue exceeds spending, that's a surplus. And what we have now, spending exceeding revenue, is a deficit. A deficit is the year-to-year result of spending too much or spending too little. When you add all the deficits up together, that's called our national debt. So just so you have that very clear. When we borrow money to pay accumulated deficits, that equals our national debt. So here's how the government tries to deal with it. Another word besides fiscal, when you think of fiscal responsibility, that's setting a budget. So Representative Paul Ryan is on the Budget Committee in the House. He's very key in that area, for example. But there's also monetary policy, and the Federal Reserve is in charge of monetary. And monetary is the supply of money in and out of the economy, just to put it really, really basically. Monetary policy is when it says it regulates the amount of credit in the economy, usually through raising or lowering interest rates. So you might want to buy a car as a high school graduate, and it might have a 2% interest rate. Well, that's great. But sometimes in history, they have to raise the interest rate because the economy is overheating too much. So they try to cool things down a little bit. And so they raise the interest rate, and that tends to slow consumer spending. Also, the government can expand or contract the money supply. Many times you'll see we need to put more money into the economy, so they lower the interest rate so banks can lend easier, or they try to restrict it, and that's when interest rates go up. When you see the word monetarism, think money. Monetarism equals money. The supply of money is the key to a nation's health. And there are varying degrees, and I'm going to put another handout with this too that you can just read through. Again, the AP test usually might have one question on it. Sometimes they have an essay on it, but it's very rare. Mostly it's in graph form, but I just want you to be familiar with these words. So monetarism, think of money. You know the result of high interest rates. If something is 10 to 20%, people probably are not going to buy an item and risk having that high interest rate. Credit cards are like that too. What is the result of low money supply? Well, if there's low money, then people are going to want it more. It's going to be more competitive. so interest rates might go up. So here's where the government comes in. Not only do they supply the amount of money in and out of the economy and do interest rates and control the budget, but monetary policy is regulated by the Federal Reserve. And the Federal Reserve, it was created in 1913 by an act of Congress, and it regulates how banks can lend money. And so if you look at a dollar bill or a $20 bill, it will say the Federal Reserve. You have the National Federal Reserve, or the main one, but then they have regional centers all around, like Dallas, Kansas City. That's where you can see where your bill is printed. There's a board of governors, and this is an appointed position by the president. The chairman of the Federal Reserve, currently Ben Bernanke. It used to be, I can see his face. Oh, I just drew a blank. I'll think of it in a minute. Alan Greenspan. There it is. Sorry about that. But the president appoints this person, and it is Senate confirmation because it is a massive job. Some people call this one of the most powerful positions in the world because you are helping to regulate the U.S. economy. The policy-making body of the Fed, or the Federal Reserve, is called the Federal Open Market Committee, the FOMC, and they usually meet to try to figure out and guide economic policy in the United States. Again, what can the Federal Reserve do? Federal Reserve controls money and interest rates. So these are some of the things that they can do. The reserve requirements, they can do a discounted rate, and they can do open market transactions. I'll let you read that. That's a little bit more detail than that you will probably need, but just understand that they do have different options for helping the economy. Now here's the part about economic policy making. These are several groups, and oftentimes you'll see these on the test. The Federal Reserve, of course, I just went over that. The chairman of the Federal Reserve, very important in the president's economic policy making group. They control the amount of money. But the president also has the CEA, the Council of Economic Advisors, experts who are responsible for forecasting economic trends. They analyze the markets, they analyze the bank industry, and they prepare economic reports for the president. So the summary and analysis of economic trends, the president needs experts who recommend policy to him. He's not an expert normally, so you do need people by your side helping you make those economic decisions. The other person is the Secretary of the Treasury. That person was just replaced. Tim Geithner just left. They analyze the financial community opinion, estimate revenue, and is a spokesperson for all U.S. financial institutions. This is a cabinet-level position. Remember, that's the bureaucratic arm of finance, would be the Secretary of the Treasury. Again, appointed by the President, confirmed by the Senate. Now, I've mentioned this one before in the budget process, and I'm going to show you this in just a minute. The OMB is called the Office of Management and Budget. This is the President's side to creating the budget. The OMB is responsible. Remember, Congress has the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office. So the executive branch puts out a budget, and so does Congress, and then they come together. But it's the president's job to send a budget to Congress to deal with. All right, the last part here, microeconomics. This was that second major topic that I mentioned at the very beginning. The government intervenes at specific sectors of the economy or in an industry. Now think of that statement. Laissez-faire politics is hands-off. So when the government interferes, we're actually a mixed economy. So we have capitalism, but we also have government policies that help guide and regulate industry. So what does that look like? Sometimes we can give people tax incentives, such as when you buy a house. The big thing right now, you might notice the solar panels, that you are getting, people who put solar panels on their house are actually getting a tax break, and they get a little money back. Businesses do that too. We have downtown incentives to help revitalize downtown. They get tax increment financing, or a TIF, you might hear that. Subsidies and loans. They give grants and loans to individuals, businesses, and state or local governments. Our farmers also often get subsidies, so the market isn't flooded. Sometimes they'll get subsidies for certain crops not to plant or to plant. And regulations is our last one. Rules, government agencies' rights that can be enforced by penalizing those who violate them. Mandates on cars for fuel efficiency, gas emissions. We talked about mandates such as the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, the Handicap, the Americans with Disabilities Act. Sometimes things are regulated by the government. The Food and Drug Administration, heavily regulated as well. So those are things, when you get into microeconomics, it's more of the managing of different industries and how the government intervenes in that process. Well, that's just a brief thing about economic policy. I'm going to put this on review too. Just skim through this. This is the budget process. This was adapted from another teacher and their student, but I like the way that they summarize this. I thought they did a great job in going over the detail. Every political actor has a stake in the budget. Remember, Congress has power of the purse. Big committees that help with the budget, House Ways and Means is that tax committee, and the Senate Finance Committee. Right here it says when the OMB was created to help curtail any mismanagement that was taking place. The CBO then was created, the Congressional Budget and Impoundment Act of 1974. There was also an act called the Gramm-Rudman-Hollings Act, and that was an automatic sequester. I don't know if we'll need to know that. We did a while ago, but we're not going to really go over that. So each year, both houses of Congress are expected to agree upon a budget resolution. Budget reconciliation is a process by which programs are authorized and revised to achieve required savings. And then it goes through different authorization bills and appropriation bills, which we talked a little bit about over Congress. These are some general statements. Remember, we are a mixed economy. We have a capitalist form of government as compared to a socialist government or communist government, where there are varying degrees of control of different parts of the economy. But you can read those. And then these were other ones. Workers everywhere are entitled to minimum wage. We have labor unions, collective bargaining. There's some statistics there about the Consumer Price Index. These are some other ones. Policies for controlling the economy, which I just talked about in that PowerPoint. Laissez-faire is hands-off, don't meddle. Monetary policy is the manipulation of money. Remember monetarism. You have the Federal Reserve. Fiscal policy is the budget. John Maynard Keynes had Keynesian economics, I always say that wrong, a theory that the government must stimulate greater demand. So that's a little bit different viewpoint. And then, of course, supply-side economics advocated by Reagan, which calls for smaller government to increase the incentive to produce more goods. It is hard to control the economy. I think you've realized that. But the president really is a point person for that, and they're responsible for helping to stimulate growth in the economy. Arenas for policymaking, again, this was just somebody's snapshot of these. There are some multiple choice questions here that you can go through, just quickly review. If you want to, if you get to it, it's great. It'll just make you stronger on the AP test, and the answers are there at the bottom. Okay? Hope you learned a little bit. This is economic policy, a little bit of social policy thrown in, but mostly economic. Thanks.